Sefer Devarim, Parashat Devarim, a new Sefer Shabbat Chazon, the week of Tisha B'Av. This year we talked about Moshe Rabbeinu retelling the story of the Eitz Yitro gave to him. And we asked a very simple question. Why does Moshe take the credit to himself and not mention Yitro at all? Why doesn't he mention Yitro? Why does he turn to Am Yisrael and tell them, oh, I had this idea to create this justice system? Why does he not mention Yitro? Why does he take the credit to himself?
Yeah, when we dived into the psukim, we realized this may not be that story at all. This actually seems to be an entirely different story, and only when we see all these details we truly began to understand why Moshe is telling this, why he's telling this now, and what it means for us.
Exactly. There's so much more to this story. Not only is it not the story of Atzat Yitro, but also once you understand this story over here, you will understand Atzat Yitro. You'll understand better what does the justice system in Am Yisrael need to look like. What is Moshe Rabbeinu aiming for? What is he teaching Am Yisrael over here? Hope you enjoy it. Take a look. Yeah, it's new Sefer Devarim, Parashat Devarim, Shabbat Chazon, the Shabbos before Tisha B'Av. And as we say every year, Sefer Devarim is Mishneh Torah, is the book in which Moshe Rabbeinu repeats the Torah, and on the one hand retells different stories that happened to Am Yisrael, but on the other hand also sometimes changes it a little bit, adds in new things, teaching us new things about these different stories that we found in the past. Now this year, what I want to talk about is the story where we find in this week's Parasha, Moshe Rabbeinu telling over the story when they set the justice system in Am Yisrael, the Sarei Alafim, Sarei Meot, Sarei Asarot, the different ministers, the different justices that they had in their justice system. And you really have to ask, this idea of setting up a system like this, of having different tiers of judges to turn to, is a very known suggestion that was made by Yitro back in Sefer Shemot, in Parashat Yitro. That's the first thing he said. The next morning after he arrived, he got up. He saw Moshe wasting his entire day and getting exhausted from sitting in front of Am Yisrael the entire day. And then he turns to him and says, what are you doing to yourself? What are you doing to this nation? Why don't you build this system? And when you look at the story this week, Moshe Rabbeinu, for some reason, does not mention Yitro at all. He doesn't even mention his name. Not only does he not mention his name, he is telling the story as if he came up with this idea, and then he turned to Am Yisrael, suggested it, and they accepted it. And we don't see any of this happening in Sefer Shemot. All what we see in Shemot is Yitro suggesting, Moshe accepting it, and doing it, and that's it. But here we see Moshe Rabbeinu turning to Am Yisrael, telling him he can't do it on his own. By the way, in that famous pasuk that we read in the tune of Eicha, the famous pasuk everybody remembers for Deuteronomy, which we read with the tune of Eicha, Moshe Rabbeinu says to Am Yisrael he can't carry them on his own. He suggests to them that they should go choose people, and then they go and choose people. And this sounds like an entirely different story than what we know back in Sefer Shemot with Yitro. So what is going on over here? Why does Moshe Rabbeinu change the story around? Why doesn't he mention Yitro? Why does he tell this story in this way?
That's a great question. We actually talked about this a little bit 2 years ago, but I want to suggest something. Maybe if it sounds so much like a different story, maybe it is a different story. Maybe if Yitro's name isn't in there, maybe this isn't the story of Yitro at all. And if we look carefully at the psukim, I think we'll find exactly what this story is, and it's not what we expect. Yes, the concept of Sarei Alafim, Sarei Meot right away sends us to the story of Yitro, but every other detail here sends us to a different story. The first hint is the fact that Moshe says, Va'omar elechem ba'et hahi lemo, I told you at that time, Lo uchal levadi set etchem, I can't carry you alone. And what is that time? Let's go one pasuk before. What time are we talking about? We're talking about the time when Moshe just said, just before, when I told you it's time to leave Har Sinai. Let's leave Har Sinai. We've discussed this also in the past, and start moving towards Eretz Yisrael, where we need to go. So this is happening at the moment when they're leaving Har Sinai and just starting their journey from Har Sinai into Eretz Yisrael. At that time, we have the story of Yitro. If we look in the psukim, something else happens exactly at that time. Just as they leave Har Sinai, we have a different story, which includes the exact words we have here. The concept of Moshe saying that he can't carry them alone, and he can't do this anymore. Moshe actually falling apart completely and almost giving up on his mission. We have this all in the story of the Mitavim, not in Shemot. In Parashat Be'alotcha, Lecha. Am Yisrael start their journey, and then they have a few different challenges on the way. And one of them is Parashat Devarim. And we discussed this in length in the past, and I recommend seeing that video because we dive there into the fact that in the midst of Moshe dealing with this situation, we ask, why does this make him fall apart? But also, while he's dealing with that situation, while he's punishing them for their complaint, in the midst of all that, something else is going on. And this is the story of Moshe setting up the Shivim Zkenim. This is the story of Moshe saying, I can't keep doing this alone, and Hashem saying that he needs to add these Shivim Zkenim, and Moshe turning to Am Yisrael and having them collect people from within them. Exactly what we see here. This isn't the story we see in Yitro where Moshe goes and selects a few people and these people are in charge. That's not what we see. He's turning to them and saying, you bring me your people. I want people that you want. I want the people from inside. And we discussed this at length over there, and I think what we said there will explain what's going on here now. Because we said, what happened there? Why was Moshe so broken? Because they just finished everything. They just finished the Ma'amad Har Sinai. They failed with Chet HaEgel. They built the Mishkan. They're finally moving on. There's such a promise of this great nation and what they're going to bring into this world, and suddenly they're complaining about that they don't have enough meat. And he just doesn't get it anymore. They're chasing nothingness to the point where the punishment is, you want meat, just take meat, until you realize that you're chasing nothing. But we said there that the solution for chasing nothing is making sure you have something in your life instead. And Moshe's recognition and Hashem pointing out to Moshe that what's happening here is you're where you are with all of your spirituality, but they're not there. You know, they have you as a leader to lead the way and to tell them what to do, but you need them to be a part of it. And then Moshe turns to them and has them bring these Shivim Zkenim, has them bring these people from within them. So that way it's not Moshe at the top trying to carry this heavy weight which has no spirituality of its own lifting itself up. It's just Moshe trying to pull them up, but it's actually them from inside raising them up. And that's how that story ends, where Yeshua comes to Moshe and says, oh no, there's some other Nevi'im who are saying Nevuah out in the field. And Moshe says, wonderful, if only everyone were Nevi'im. And I think that's what's happening here. Moshe is talking about the fact that this is the end of his days. And he's reminding them, remember, it's not about me. I'm not going to be going into the land. And therefore, the first thing I'm going to tell you is, remember that we left Har Sinai, and I told you that Har Sinai is not what it's about. It's about bringing Har Sinai into Eretz Yisrael. And yeah, even though I'm not going, you are. This story isn't about me. This story is about you. And that's why he brings in this point. How can I carry you alone? You're much bigger. You're much greater than me. As he says, and we right away connect this to this negative context because of the tune. But just before that, he says, why can't I carry you? Because you're blessed like the stars, because God blessed you, because you're a great nation, because of your great potential, you're greater than what I can do. It needs to be within you. So I think that's the story that happens here, and that's the story that's so fit for this moment. Remember, the spirituality isn't me. The spirituality is within you, in each and every one of you. You have people from within you who can do that. We see this also in the words. By Yitro, it talks about they'll take care of the small things, and the big things you'll take care of. But here we see the opposite term. We see the small and big thing they take care of, right? They're dealing with everything. The spirituality is within you. Don't think it's all up to me. Don't think that if I'm gone, you lost it all. It's not about me. It's about you. And that spirituality is built into each and every one of you.
Very good, very good. I think that's exactly the point where, like you're saying, in this week's Parasha in Sefer Devarim, we see Moshe Rabbeinu turning to them and telling them the exact same words that Yitro said, but instead of like Yitro saying, Et hadavar hagadol yeviunu lecha and hadavar hakaton yishpetun hem, here Moshe Rabbeinu says, you guys have to deal with davar gadol and katan, both of the things, large and small, because shamoa ben achichem. It has to be something between you guys, between Am Yisrael with each other. But let's take it back a little bit before that. We'll get back to this point. But it's very good what you're saying, that Yitro is a different story than this story going on over here. But we can't not acknowledge the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu uses this term of sarei alafim, sarei meot, sarei. This is Yitro's idea. This is Yitro gave him this thought. We find it in Parashat Yitro. So what is it doing here? But actually, when you take a look in the Psukim, when you go back to that story of Shivim Zkenim, like you were saying, of Chet HaMitonenim, Chet HaMitavim, what happens just before that story? When we take a look in Sefer Bamidbar, right before that, there is the two opposite nuns of Vayi bin Soharon, the two opposite nuns that are meant to separate between two different stories, even though they are connected. And what are these these stories right before this Chet HaMitonenim, V'Chet HaMitavim, right before the Shivim Skenim. What was the story? Moshe Rabbeinu comes to Yitro. Yitro is leaving, and Moshe asks him, don't leave. V'ayita lanu la'inaim. Stay with us and be eyes for us. Be our eyes in order to lead us. But then Yitro, as we know from Sefer Shemot, where it ended with Yitro leaving, getting up and leaving after he gave his Eitzah. So Yitro doesn't stay with Am Yisrael. Yitro leaves. And after this, right after this, we get these two sins, Chet HaMitonenim and Chet HaMitavim. And like you were saying, like we spoke back then, those sins break Moshe Rabbeinu. They break him so hard that the Torah says that it was Ra Be'einav. It was a bad thing in Moshe's eyes. The same eyes Moshe Rabbeinu asked Yitro to be the Einaim, to be the eyes. What's going on now is bad for Moshe. And Moshe breaks down and he says, you know what? I can't handle this on myself anymore. The same words, Lo uchal levadi, lo uchal anochi levadi. I can't do it on my own anymore. I need help. I need real help. And then Moshe Rabbeinu goes and sets up the Shivim Skenim. This happens 3 days, according to Pshat. Rashi says it wasn't even 3 days. It was 1 day. They had Kfitzat HaDerech, Rashi points out. This happens right after the story Yitro leaves. This happens right after Yatzat Yitro. This is all connected. The story of Yitro suggesting to do the Sarei Alafim, Sarei Meot, and the story of the Shivim Skenim of setting up this justice system with a Sanhedrin on top. This is all the same story. It all happens together. We miss this because one happens in Shemot and one happens in Bamidbar. But when looking at this week's Parsha, we understand that this is all happening at the same time. This is all happening together. And maybe this is why Moshe doesn't mention Yitro, because Yitro suggested set up this system, this justice system with the different levels, different tiers of ministers. But Moshe Rabbeinu takes that and adds to that the Shivim Skenim. Not only does he add to that the Shivim Skenim, he also adds to that, like we were saying, he adds to that the fact that it comes from within Am Yisrael. It's not like Yitro suggested to put on top of Am Yisrael, go find the right people to put them on top and have them decide for Am Yisrael. Put this small group of people on top in a Supreme Court and have them decide for the nation, but rather go to the nation and see what the nation wants and listen to what the nation wants, because in the end of the day, it's between Ish and Achiv. Shamoa ben Achichem v'shaftu Ish et Achiv. It's brothers that are judging each other. It's not a Supreme Court that is put on top of them. It's not a system that is put on top of them, but rather it has to come out from Am Yisrael. And maybe this is why Yitro is not mentioned, because it's not Yitro's idea. It's Moshe taking Yitro's idea. It's Moshe listening to what HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him to do, the Shivim Skenim, and together he creates this one system that starts on the bottom, that starts with Am Yisrael, and through Am Yisrael, through Ish et Achiv, that's how you create the good justice system, the valid justice system. As we know time and time again in Navi, as we are approaching now Tisha B'Av, Shabbat Chazon, the Nevi'im before the Churban, they would cry and yell about this fact that the judges, that the ministers were detached from Am Yisrael, were this elite level in society that were disconnected from what was going on with the real nation, with what's going on with the whole nation, and they saw themselves disconnected, and they saw themselves as an elite, and they allowed themselves to do things so much so that HaKadosh Baruch Hu turned to Am Yisrael and says, Lama li rov zivchechem? Why do I need even your korbanos? Why do I need your sacrifices if this is the way you are behaving, if this is the way your justice system looks like? Maybe this is also one of the reasons why we connect this Eicha Ucha Levadi with the tune of Eicha, telling us that Moshe Rabbeinu is pointing out to the main message of the justice system. It's not me. It's not Levadi. I am not putting this justice system on top of you from above, deciding for you. This is not me. This is you. This is Am Yisrael together deciding in a democratic way who's going to be the justice system. Each shevet brings their justices. Each shevet brings the anashim yaduim, the people that they know they can trust, and it comes from below. It comes from Ish et Achiv, Shamoa ben Achichem. Maybe this is what this whole Parsha is about. Moshe Rabbeinu telling us there wasn't different justice systems. There wasn't a justice system that was put from on top. It wasn't Yitro. It wasn't only the Sanhedrin. It was all together Moshe Rabbeinu creating this system. A system that is not only meant to be on top and make sure everything is in order and everything is in place, but a system that comes from below and elevates Am Yisrael. And this is the concept which Moshe Rabbeinu uses. We talked about this in the past, the concept of to carry, esa, the shorish of raising up, of elevating. Moshe Rabbeinu says, you have to be elevated as a nation. I can't do it on my own from on top. It cannot be done from on top, from a Supreme Court on top with a small group of people. It has to be from within the nation. It has to be from the tzibur himself, from the society themselves, that ask for it, that demand it, that choose the people themselves, the people that they know they can trust. That's how you create the justice system that lasts, a justice system that just like the Nevi'im talk about that Yerushalayim needs the tzedek and the shalom that is so missing in the nevuot HaChurban, in the nevuos of the destruction of the Churban that we read during these weeks before Tisha B'Av, the justice that was so missing from Yerushalayim back then in the days of the Churban. Maybe this is what Moshe Rabbeinu is pointing out to us over here. I could have not elevated you on my own. I could have not carried you on my own. This is why we created this new justice system, not Yitro's system, not something else, but everything together, the system that comes from below, from Am Yisrael, for Am Yisrael.
Wow, that's very interesting. Really, it all comes together. Maybe at the beginning there, Moshe tried to follow Yitro's steps while Yitro was still there and set Anshei Chayil, that's the word. These are like powerful people, because when it's being pushed upon them from the top, you need powerful people. But the words used here are Anashim Chachamim, wise people, which obviously throws us again to the Shivim Zkenim, who are the wise, who are the spiritual. That's who we need. We don't need people with power. We need people who will really raise us up. And maybe that's also the explanation of the word Eicha. Because yeah, I get it. The word Eicha reminds us of Eicha, but it's a totally different meaning. There it's negative in the Navi, in Eicha, it's like, how could this have happened? How did Yerushalayim become what it has become? That's not what Moshe is saying. He's just saying, I can't do it alone. How could I do this alone? He's saying something good. He's saying you're so big. He's saying you have a lot of troubles and challenges, but he also says you're like the stars. So why are we singing it as like Eicha? What are we trying to say with Eicha? But the word Eicha itself, we can't say it without thinking of what it reminds us the first time we see, and Chazal send us right there. The term Ayeka, when Hashem turns to man, to Adam Arishon, after the first sin and says, where are you, Ayeka? And also the word Ayeka or Eicha is A-ko. Similar to we have other words in Hebrew like Eifo, Eze, Eze, A-ko. Ko is the term, I think we've discussed this also in the past, that's used by the Nevi'im always. Ko Amar Hashem. It's talking about the things, the vision of what could be. So where is that vision? That's what Yirmiyahu is saying in Eicha, right? Eicha, how could this be the vision for Yerushalayim of what it should be, of what it could be? Where is that vision? But if we go back and realize that the story Moshe is talking about is not the story of Yitro, and it's not around Mamad Har Sinai. It's the story of the Mitavim. It's that moment when Am Yisrael, with all of its greatness and with all of its future and with all of the hope he had for them after everything they've gone through, are chasing nothingness, just want another bite of meat. And he's turning to them and he's saying, I can't do this alone. Where are you? Ayeka, where are you? You need to be part of this story. It can't just be me carrying you from on top. Until you join in, until you ask yourself, Ayeka, where am I? Am I part of this? No, just trust Moshe to take me where I need to go. We need to be a part of this. Havu lachem, says Moshe. Bring for yourself, not for me, for yourself. Bring from yourself, bring for yourself. And when we're all in this together, and when we're all asking ourselves our own Ayeka, then together we can really raise ourselves up, laset et masah ha'am hazeh, to raise Am Yisrael up to really achieve its goal.
Very good, very good. And of course, the comparison doesn't only end with the words Eicha, but also Eicha Esa Levadi in this week's Parasha is Eicha Yashva Badad in Megillat Eicha. Of course, they resemble each other. Moshe Rabbeinu saying, how can I carry you on my own? Maybe connecting to everything we said, he's saying, if I will end up carrying you on my own and not you stepping up and not you creating the justice system for yourselves, you know what's going to happen? It's going to be a terrible justice system, and it's going to end up resulting in having Yerushalayim sitting on its own. It's going to end up resulting in Am Yisrael leaving Yerushalayim and Yerushalayim just being there, because Yerushalayim will be there, but it's going to be on its own without Am Yisrael, because Am Yisrael didn't step up to create their justice system, to have the justice system that fits them, instead of me carrying it on my own and putting it on you from on top. This resemblance of the words, of course, is there, but we're out of time. This has been way too long already. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to share it around, comment below on YouTube, tell us what you liked or what you didn't like, and of course, like the video. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing and help us grow the channel. And Shkoyach Yitzi.
Shkoyach Tuvia, Shabbat Shalom, and Besorot Tovot.
Shkoyach Tuvia, Shabbat Shalom, Besorot Tovot, and Mitzvah Hashem. We'll talk again next week on Wednesday.